I think I took with me from Vienna a certain philosophy which helped me here. And when I looked at Jerusalem and the differences in people, I came to the conclusion that you could run a peaceful city only by a very high amount of tolerance. My only effort was to get normal, decent, neighborly relationship in the city. And I think this was achievable and is still achievable. I became mayor and I stuck to it for 28 years. It was, of course, a divided city. Great parts of the city you couldn't visit because people shot from the other side. It was the poorest possible city. It was cut off for a long time through a siege. I had hoped, of course, that the city would become one by peaceful means, by children playing on the frontier or so. It became eventually one city during the Six-Day War. I became a mayor of a complete city, but a very difficult city. 40 different Christian denominations, 75,000 Arabs, who were not always very lovingly related. I think in the end we'll have peace here. I don't think it will come fast, even if these agreements are carried out, and new agreements will be carried out. The hatred is too deep, and it has to evaporate over a time. But I have no doubt about the end result. The end result will be peace. The citadel was first built by Herod about the time of Christ. And when the Romans came and destroyed the city, they didn't destroy the citadel because they wanted to continue using it as a strong point for their army. And since then, it has always been used for military purposes. The tower now, this one and that one, as you see it, has been built by Suleiman the Magnificent 500 years ago. Down below, if you look, you will see much bigger stones. Those are still the remnants of Herod. When we, in this case, the Israelis, came here in '67, it was a Jordanian army post. And we decided to try to turn it into something civilian, to use it as a museum of the history of Jerusalem. I was born on the 27th of May of 1911. It was in a small Hungarian village where my father had an assignment. It was a large estate that belonged to the Rothschilds. He had been working for the Rothschilds in Vienna, and he spent some time there on this estate. Within months, and I don't remember that period at all, we returned to Vienna, and I regard myself for all practical purposes, for good or bad, a Viennese. I grew up in Vienna, and when the war started, in 1914, my father, who had gone to university, as every university student, was a reserve officer in the Austrian army, and he joined the army. In 1918, At the end of the war, my father went back to work for the Rothschilds. That was, of course, in Vienna. And we went back to Vienna and we rented a house where we lived, where my parents lived until they left for Palestine in 1938. Nothing has changed here. These are all the same buildings that were here at the time. We lit candles on Friday evenings. We went on all the holidays to a nearby synagogue. We kept more or less a kosher house. I don't know how strict, but certainly nothing definitely non-kosher would have ever entered the house. And my father was what you then called religious, not what you call today. This was a more liberal religious attitude and is today customary. But I remember Oberrabbiner Chayes very well. He was a very impressive personality. He was a great Zionist. He was the chairman of the Zionist Actions Committee. Not all rabbis were Zionists. He was an exception. And I think his influence was much later. I had lessons before my bar mitzvah. To the shock of my parents and all the others, at the end of my prepared rasha, I said I would like to add something. And I added the fact that I belonged to a youth movement and we wanted such a boat. And I would be very happy if we could get contributions for it. And we did, and we were able to buy the boat.
Was it your first fundraising action?
Absolutely. Lueger was long before my time. He was a very famous mayor who did very much for the development of Vienna. And that was his major achievement, of course. But at that time, you had the beginning of anti-Semitism, because it was the time of emancipation, and Jews started penetrating the society, and that created the anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism was a social anti-Semitism, not a violent anti-Semitism. But he was the symbol of it and the, so to say, the father of this kind of anti-Semitism in Austria. My father was a member in the same students' organization, the Lese- und Redehalle, where Herzl had been a member before, so I was given that name. Here we marched by students and youth movements and Zionists once a year on Herzl's birthday or death day, I don't remember anymore. And I'm very grateful to the people here that they kept the grave as it was, although the remains of Herzl and his parents were transferred to Jerusalem, where we are commemorating Herzl's birthday once a year. But this is exactly how I remember it, the same black stone and the white stone around. I haven't been in there since. It's a very moving memory. I went much more to the youth movement than I went to school. I was not a particularly good student because study didn't very much interest me. What interested me was the youth movement, the Blau-Weiß, the Gelet Lawan. And that was a youth movement, a Jewish youth movement, a Zionist youth movement, which eventually accepted rules that you can remain in the movement only if you intended in the end to go to Palestine and join a kibbutz there. That became gradually their ideology, and I remained. Obviously, I was ready one day to go to Palestine and join a kibbutz. And I served as a messenger boy at the Zionist Congress in 1925 that took place in Vienna. And through that I became, of course, at least visually familiar with some of the great leaders of the Zionist movement, Dr. Weizmann and Mr. Ben-Gurion and Mr. Charette and others. So for me this was a very exciting affair. While I was working in the movement in Germany, we saw a great development towards National Socialism and towards Hitlerism. There in a winter camp that we had in 1933, we had the first clash with a group of Nazi youngsters. It wasn't very serious, but still you didn't know what would happen. And then at the end of January, Hitler was installed as the Chancellor by the President, General Hindenburg. And I left Germany very soon afterwards. And at that time, my certificate from the British also materialized. I had waited for a long time, but finally my turn came on as well. And in the end of 1935, I traveled to Israel on a boat, and it was called Jeruzalem. Maybe that was symbolic. Anyway, I came and I joined a kibbutz in Kinneret, which afterwards settled in Engeb. This was a period when such settlements were started, 2 or 3 already before us and some 30 after Engeb. We went on 20 or 30 trucks with walls, wooden walls prepared and a wooden watchtower prepared and everything else to the place early in the morning at dusk, and the village was set up, the very primitive houses, the walls to protect you, the watchtower to watch out against any kind of danger, and it was a major operation during the day. People came from fairly far away to help us to fill these double walls with gravel that they took from, in this case it was easy, that they took from the shores of the sea, where gravel had accumulated over hundreds of years. And in the end of the day, we were left there to fend for ourselves and to take care of ourselves in a new village that has been created in one day. At that time also, my wife Tamar, whom I had known in Vienna and who had been to the same youth movement, and we went out together in Vienna, and we planned to live together, had come to Israel, and we got married. It was no great ceremony, no great affair. But it enabled her legally to remain in Palestine. The British were very strict on these forms. Here it starts with prehistory, and then come Jewish and Christian moments, then come the Muslim, and then it goes until 1967. The later period has not been treated yet. If you have any questions here, I'm ready to answer. Here you have a model of the city of David. At that time, it had become a policy to send people from kibbutzim to abroad to various countries where youth movements were in existence, and to help them in motivation and in organization. I was pressured into going to England and work with the Habonim youth movement, which I did for a short while, end of 1938 and beginning of 1939. Things in Germany became worse and worse, and one day all the young people who had been on preparations for Palestine and had been in training in farms to become farmers in Palestine were arrested. They gave us 3,000 certificates for such people to go to England, not to Palestine. And I went on a very short trip from England to Europe. I went further, I went to Vienna, and there I had the chance to speak to the officer who was in charge of Jewish affairs. He was a man whose name afterwards became obnoxious, but at the time he was not known at all. He was an unknown quantity. He sat in his office in a black uniform of an SS man. Name was Eichmann. You all know what Eichmann meant a lot later, but at that time he was just a nondescript officer, and I came to him with my story. At the time, the Germans had not yet decided on a liquidation of the Jews. What they wanted at that time was to get rid of the Jews in their area. Anyway, Eichmann agreed to let these 3,000 youngsters, partly from Austria, partly from Czechoslovakia, partly from Germany, go to England, and I felt that I had done an important job, an important mission. And until today, I sometimes meet people who had at the time gone to England, but at the end of the war, they came to Israel. That was the whole purpose, and it worked out. We wanted to bring Jews in, and we brought them in even by illegal means, illegal ships that ran the gamut of the British Navy, and this was frozen. We were looking for contact with Jewish groups, underground groups in Europe. We wanted that in order to encourage them, to help them, if not otherwise, by sending them money if possible. We wanted that in order to help here or there if you could save somebody by taking somebody out. And Istanbul was a neutral capital from which you could have contact with occupied Europe. I came there under the aegis of the British Secret Service. They allowed me to come there. They gave me the cover. And I got a permit from the British that I was a journalist. The journalist was the editor of the Engeb Daily, which didn't exist. It was a very sad period. We were living to try and help, and our means were very limited. At that time, we heard for the first time of the terrible things that happened in the camps. And we tried to convey this, and we conveyed it to Geneva, where there was an office of the Jewish Agency, and we conveyed it to Jews in the United States and to Jews in Britain, but they weren't able to awake the world to it. And the world didn't believe it for a long time, that such things could at all happen. At the end of the war, the first city I visited was Munich, and the nearest concentration camp to Munich was Dachau, to see the things about which I had heard and which had been described in letters there and back, and which had been our everyday affair, so to say, to see it physically. And I saw physically what I expected to see, what I need. Today, nowadays, you have individuals who say all this didn't exist at all this didn't happen, and you have all these people who try to deny that the Holocaust happened at all. Well, I saw Dachau with my own eyes, and I know that it happened, and it was just as terrible as you ever thought it was. You see a comparatively modern Jerusalem that has been built by Herod. He builds the temple. Now, a part of this is visible for everybody who goes to the old city. The stairs have been destroyed, but the stones there under the stairs are still there. Those can still be seen if you look at the above the Wailing Wall. Herod had been spending a good deal in Rome, and he was very obligated to the emperors of Rome, and he tried to imitate them by the vastness of his building. In 1946, when Ben-Gurion came over to the United States, he had gathered some 20, 30 outstanding supporters of Zionism, explained to them that the conditions were such that most probably the final decision would be taken by arms against the British, against the Palestinians. One didn't know yet, but one had to prepare a strong military force. And the only strong military force that existed in Israel was the Haganah. Of course, it had to be changed into a regular fighting force. In September 47, on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, my son was born, and a short while later, a few weeks later, I carried out an assignment to go to the United States and strengthen our delegation in security and Haganah affairs. I arrived there maybe a week before the United Nations decided on the creation of a Jewish state. That was a decision taken on the 29th of November. It's for us a historical date, and so I remember it exactly. We had to prepare ourselves to take over. The activities were varied. There were open activities and clandestine activities. The clandestine activities were purchasing boats, which would be rebuilt to accept a much greater number of people living for the few days of the journey between somewhere in the voyage, between somewhere in Europe and the coast of Palestine. We also tried to get in a small way arms. A small way meant that we went to individuals, or we encouraged individuals who had taken a pistol and sometimes a submachine gun home as a souvenir at the end of the war to give it to us, and we tried to ship these things to Israel. These were always small consignments. They were comparatively easy to ship, straight through the mail, designed as something else. But this is not how you furbish an army. We were under such difficult circumstances that an individual pistol and an individual submachine gun also meant a great deal. But we were dreaming all the time about major army supplies. We had established an office in New York in a little hotel called Hotel 14. It was on 14 East 60th Street. In this Hotel 14, there was downstairs in the cellar a great nightclub called the Copacabana. We never had time to go to the nightclub. We only heard the noise from the nightclub. But one day we were in a difficult situation. There had been some arms collected and brought to the waterfront and loaded on a ship. And in the waterfront we had a great deal of help. You asked about the mafia before. The mafia took care to persuade the harbor people to let these cases of ours loaded freely without any customs or police investigation on certain boats. Now, the equipment was on that particular boat, but the captain was not going to leave until he got a fairly major amount of money as advance. The rest he would get on delivery in Israel. We had to get this money to him. We were all the time, the 2 or 3 of us who worked here were all the time observed by the FBI. When I was going down to the harbor, to the pier, and going to the captain and giving him the money, it couldn't have been done without being detected, without being followed, and the whole enterprise was in danger. At Copacabana, you had various artists function, and one of them was a man who since then has become famous, and although he is today not a youngster anymore, makes everybody excited when he appears on the stage, and that was Frank Sinatra. In between acts, I approached Frank Sinatra, told him my story, and asked him to take a briefcase with money down to the pier and give it to the captain. And he was a man full of spunk and full of ideas and full of willingness to do dangerous things, as he is until today in many ways. And we became great friends afterwards. And this is in Rome. They took the 7-stick candelabra, which was of gold, to Rome for a victory march. And this is a copy of what is shown on the Ark of Titus in Rome. And here on the other side, you see the beginnings of Christianity, of which you will see a great deal more in some of the other rooms. This is the Church of St. Anne's. It's a very beautiful architectural, very beautiful building. And it went from hand to hand at various periods. Now the Muslim sheikhs are moving out, you see, and the nuns are moving in, and you see the cross. I came back at the beginning of May in '48, and the thing that then was most difficult to obtain was a ticket to get into the museum, the then museum on Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv, where the people who had been meanwhile working as a temporary government, gradually preparing themselves, were meeting under the chairmanship of Mr. Ben-Gurion, declaring the state of Israel. I got this great advantage, and I don't know of any other person who had been both at the decision at the United Nations and counting the votes there privately, and at the declaration. So this is, for me, a very interesting memory of these two different positions. The same evening, a little later, the first Egyptian planes came over Tel Aviv and bombed Tel Aviv. The Arabs attacked us from all sides. We lost in this war 6,000 to 7,000 young people, but we won. We established a Jewish state. We threw back all the Arab armies. I went back to the United States in '51 after we had decided to start the bond issue. That was additional capital. We had absorbed twice as many immigrants as we had Jewish inhabitants in Israel. There were about 600,000 Jews here when the state was started, and we absorbed during the first 2 years 1,002,000 immigrants. Even today, you see here in Jerusalem how immigrants from Russians to Ethiopians are accepted in the clear knowledge that this is our task, because it makes life for us easier or more difficult is of no consequence. Those are Jews on the run in difficult situations. We are here to absorb them. And this was the first humanitarian task, Zionist task, political task, more important than all the political speeches, to have these Jews here in Israel and settle here. With all the efforts of the United Jewish Appeal and of other Jewish appeals in America and England or so, this was not the kind of money that could cover this need. So it was decided to have a bond issue of the State of Israel. We prepared all this, and we prepared Mr. Ben-Gurion's visit to 10 cities to start the bond sale in every one of those cities. We were received in every city with the greatest of enthusiasm. But on the way, we did something else, which was one of the exciting events in my life. We took Mr. Ben-Gurion via Princeton, and in Princeton he visited with Einstein. This hour was Einstein centered around the idea, was there a superior being? Was there some kind of superior power, not necessarily the individual God who helps you when you are in trouble, to whom many people pray, but was there some unifying idea to the universe? But this was an hour of particular flavor. I don't remember any other in my life of that kind, and I don't think many people have such an experience at all. I had a desire to catch up with a little bit of reading and knowledge and wanted to go for a year to Harvard. When I was phoned by Mr. Ben Gurion and asked to come and run his office. And I finally came back and organized the Prime Minister's office. He was a comparatively easy person to work with. In all the matters that I dealt with, he didn't ever mix in. He was interested in foreign affairs, he was interested in education, he was of course interested in defense. With defense I had nothing to do. With other things I had something to do. It was for me to decide what I would bring to him and what not.
That was a short time after our War of Independence. Hundreds of thousands of immigrants came in from German concentration camps and from many other places. We needed technical aid and economic assistance badly. The United States offered it to us, as you call it, in diplomatic parlance, without strings attached. Now, 10 years after, looking back, we certainly have no regrets.
You see, this is showing the Muslim part. At the beginning, during the first 60, 70 years after Muhammad, Muslims turned to Jerusalem to pray. And here you have a mihrab and a prayer niche that comes from a little later, when they decided to turn to Mecca, and not anymore to Jerusalem. No tourist office existed. So I started a tourist office, which we ran from the Prime Minister's office. This started working out. I found out that we would never get good art as a gift or so if we wouldn't build a good museum. A proper place where to hang them, a proper place where to guard them. I collected a few people who were connected with art and with archaeology, and in the end, in '65, we opened the museum. We had no idea how to run a museum, what to do with a museum. We had the great luck that the great museum director from Holland, who had also been a hero of the underground, Willem Sandberg, was willing to work with us for a couple of years. He trained the first curators, he set the standards, and today we have a museum which, first of all, has 1 million visitors a year. Many people come here only in order to see the Dead Sea Scrolls that they can't see anywhere else in the world. Many people come here to see the best collection in the world today of Jewish ceremonial art. And it has become a great institution for everybody. I regard myself much more as an administrator. So while I didn't have any great expectations of being elected, I felt my role as a candidate for the mayoralty was a more natural one than if I would have been number so-and-so on the Knesset list. So I stood for the mayoralty, and I didn't expect to be elected. To my great astonishment, I was elected, and here I was, and I became mayor, and I stuck to it for 28 years until I was defeated in 1993. Well, the most important thing is not the 28 years, but that we had a wall here, and all this was beyond in Jordanian territory, and up on that roof there of this building, which is a school, you had an Arab army post, and they shot at us. And you can see the shot marks if you look here at this wall. Until the 1st of December, I never entered City Hall. On the 1st of December in the afternoon, there was a little ceremony there where the former mayor would hand me over his chair or whatever it was. At that time, an old friend of ours, Chagall, was in the country, and he was sitting in the afternoon here on the back of this sofa. We were talking, and I invited him to come with me, and he refused. He said, "I'll stay here until you come back." When I came home, Mr. Chagall, he found somewhere the colored pencils of my children, and he put into the Chagall books illustrations like this, you see. This is not part of the book. This is part of his edition. And that was, of course, something that consoled me greatly at the time when I wasn't very happy about the mayoralty. It was the poorest possible city. Well, it was, of course, a divided city. Great parts of the city you couldn't visit because people shot from the other side. It was also a fairly neglected city. There were no trees or parks in public spaces. My main thoughts were, how will I stand these 4 years of mayoralty in order to get out? Then came suddenly the war in 1967. The army had given instructions that Jerusalem should neither be bombed from the air nor attacked with artillery. We were afraid for the holy places like the Holy Sepulchre or the great mosques, that they might be hit, and that would be damaged forever. We were not so much afraid for holy Jewish places. First of all, there are no holy Jewish places. The city is holy to the Jews, not individual places. And we lost 180 young people out of our desire to protect Christian and Muslim holy places. All over the city there was damage and many problems. And I ran from one problem to the other, taking care of children, taking care of elderly people. All the men were in the army. In the shelters there were only women and elderly men. This was my task. I became a mayor of a complete city, but a very difficult city. Here everybody comes to pray. Some in the mystical belief that their prayers will deliver them, and they put little pieces of paper into the crevices of the wall. But to me there is also the memory of having this plaza cleaned of little adobe huts which were belonging to an Algerian foundation where 106 Arab families lived, and we took this over. So we offered the people who lived there that we would pay rent for them somewhere else for 5 years instead of here, because here the rent was very low. And this was the only place in the entire city where we destroyed something that the Arabs built. I immediately realized what attraction this would be. That on holy days like Yom Kippur, and on the day of the destruction of the Day of Atonement, and the Day of Destruction of the Temple, Tisha B'Av, there would be tens and tens of thousands. In fact, hundreds of thousands came. Well, anybody can come here, and it is true the religious Jews show a greater affection and less economic needs than the others do. I accept their religion, and I even regard it highly. it is a thing that has to be regarded highly, their devotion. But if it goes on like this, in 40 years you will have a religious majority in Jerusalem. That wouldn't disturb me at all. What disturbs me is that they are intolerant. I don't want them to dictate to me or others like me how I should live. And that freedom we have to preserve. Not only for us, but also for the Muslims and the Christians. The city and we will be judged all over the world how we treat minorities. And Jews are minorities all over the world, and if we demand that they be decently treated, we have to treat minorities here in the best of fashion. There was an Arab town council. We went to them and suggested to them that they should join our town council in toto as a group and with equal responsibilities and with equal rights. They refused that. They didn't recognize Israel at all, certainly not the reunification of the city, and that was that. All our attempt of persuasion didn't help. We had afterwards years of reconstruction. The old city was in a terrible situation. It had no sewage, no drainage. Only 10% of the people had water at home. The others had to go to the well. If you take into account that we built a great clinic, which today deals with 900 patients a day, a library, instead of the little library they had in a rented room, a big new library. All this partly done by the Jerusalem Foundation. But the Jerusalem Foundation didn't get money from rich Arabs. It got it only from Jews who said they wanted to help, but they were very selective over what they wanted to help. I don't think that the Arabs were getting less than they should have. Here you have the first film made in Jerusalem about 100 years ago. You see various visitors to come to Jerusalem. Now we come to the British Mandate. And all this was under British rule. Here you have the Union Jack. And the British left, and we took over. Here was an old city neglected over hundreds of years, which had to be brought into a good shape. And we asked famous people all over the world to join the Jerusalem Committee. So you have the Jerusalem Committee, you have the Jerusalem Foundation, and you have a great number of individuals who helped us. And without this international help, we wouldn't have achieved the comparatively pleasant town that we have achieved today. Very happy to have you here with us, Mr. Hitchcock.
Lovely to be here, Mr. Mayor.
And I hope you'll have a very nice day in Jerusalem. You know, it's a very old city.
Yes,
3,000 years.
Well?
I prepared a little symbol, the arms of the city, you know,
Good.
the Lion of Judah and the Wall of Jerusalem and the name of Jerusalem and the olive branch around it, because Jerusalem is the city of peace.
Yes.
City of peace. This is what it means in Hebrew.
we have 40 Christian denominations. We have repaired, for instance, in Jerusalem, after we came back, a great number of churches. Sometimes we had to absorb some Christian refugees, like Armenians who had to run away from somewhere. And we were... בסדר?
כל בסדר, תודה רבה.
יופי לראות אותך. The Arabs wanted a monument for their war dead. And I felt that as many Arabs were killed here, that was a justified demand. Eventually we had a meeting at the city council, and the faction of the Likud prophesied that this would be the place from which all the demonstrations would start. From here they would start conquering the city. And they were violent speeches, difficult to remember, difficult to imagine. I think it was the most violent meeting of the city council we had until the early hours of the morning. But we had a majority and we decided, and this was built. And I think it's an honor to the city that we allow everybody in the city, every section in the city, to commemorate their dead. No revolution has ever started, no demonstration has ever started. There are great differences between the Arabs and us, and they cannot be overbridged. But by overbridging the small differences, we can make life easier.
We pay tax, Mr. Teddy, like any other Jewish. And
you think you don't get your share?
yes.
Well, I think you are not correct. I'll tell you why. A great deal of money is spent on things which are not services. For instance, when we came here and united the city, only 10% of the population had running water. 90% didn't have running water, they went to the well. Today, 99% of the people all around Jerusalem, in all the things which you recognize as Jerusalem or not, but which we regard as Jerusalem, they all have water. Today you have in the whole of the old city, and in some other parts, not too many, it should have been much more, a great deal of normal, civilized being.
You're telling us here to appreciate what the Israeli municipality has done for us. But if we start appreciating more and taking more responsibilities, that will minimize our right to ask for our own country. Don't you think so? I mean, you're telling us here to take our responsibilities, and when we take them and we ask for our own country, you say, why? You're getting everything.
We'll say that anyway. We will not give up Jerusalem. I said to you before, I suggested to everybody who comes on the council to start every speech with a declaration that it doesn't recognize the unification of Jerusalem. But after that, it should ask for a new road in Beit Hanina, or for a new road in Shafat, or for a new school somewhere else.
Jerusalem is a city that has more obligations than any other city. We have historical monuments we have to take care of, whether they are Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or what they are. We founded the Jerusalem Foundation, to which everybody, Jews and non-Jews, could contribute. Well, first of all, I still have a lot of things to wind up from 28 years of being a mayor. There are many things that have gone over to the municipality, but there were also a number of things that are personal that I have to complete.
I also helped the Jerusalem Foundation continuously with the raising of funds that are just as much needed as before, if not more so. And that's it. It's a full day's work.
My question is, none of the sides wants to give Jerusalem up. We don't want to give them up, and the Palestinians don't want to give it up. Now, I've heard somebody say, I don't remember who, that maybe there is a possibility of making the only real good solution would be to make the old city an international place.
It would be a disaster for the city. You are all young. You haven't seen the city when it was divided. Arabs have lots of complaints, many justified, many I think not justified, or brought about by themselves. But a divided city, whoever has seen that, will not want it to be repeated again. I was up on the mount the other day for some kind of a conversation with the Mufti, and I said to him, you know, you have this only temporarily. He said, why temporarily? I said, until the Messiah comes. When the Messiah comes, he will decide if it will be yours or ours. He said, why do you think that the Messiah won't be a Muslim? I said, well, it's unlikely, but if it happens, we'll accept what the Messiah says. But that's true. That's true. If not, the war will continue for 500 years. We shall not return East Jerusalem to the Arabs. But we will, within Jerusalem, can give the Arabs the rule of borough over East Jerusalem. But we shall not divide the city.
What are the ways which make the relationship between the two sides in Jerusalem very good?
Have you ever invited somebody from the other side to your house? Try it once. Let the Palestinians try to invite once people they met here to their houses, and vice versa. I think Jerusalem is in the limelight, whatever happens. Everywhere in the world, people are looking towards Jerusalem. And the way how we behave towards minorities in Jerusalem is determining to a great extent the attitude of nations towards us. In the end, it will depend to the major part on us, on our behavior towards ourselves, how we build Jerusalem, and what we do to strengthen Jerusalem, and so on and so on. I'm holding here a leaflet that we brought out many years ago on one of Mr. Ben Gurion's late birthdays. It has his drawing on it, but the most important thing is what he said. He said it in Hebrew, but here's the translation. The state of Israel will be judged by its moral worth and human values. We cannot afford to be a state like every other state.
יום הולדת שמח, לחיים. לא דבר.